Hello and welcome or welcome back to another episode of Shoulders Down. My name is Leah Kern, and here on this podcast, I'm here to help you break free from binge restrict cycles, untangle your worth from weight, and live your life without food rules running the show. When I first started sharing content about intuitive eating and body image, I leaned a lot more into sharing about my personal experiences because I started doing this kind of work professionally, as in sharing content, 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I was 5 years into my own intuitive eating and body image journey. So, to say that in a way that sounds less confusing, right now I'm 10 years into my own intuitive eating and body image journey. I guess almost 11 years. And so when I started this work professionally, sharing content on what started out as my Instagram page, now my newsletter, my podcast, my blog, it has been 5 years. So when I started doing that, I had 5 years of this work under my belt personally. I feel like I'm saying that in such a confusing way, but you get the point. So earlier on, because the experience of being in the throes of disordered eating and diet culture and body image distress, because that was more current for me, I shared stories from my own life much more frequently. When I was still gaining my voice with intuitive eating and body image content, it just felt more accessible to talk about my own stories. But over the years, in the last 5 years, I have strayed away from talking about my own story as often. I mean, I certainly still weave it in here and there, but I talk a lot more about clients and client stories and the research and things I've read in books and things I've learned along the way from other professionals and supervision. But today, we're bringing it back to the roots. I'm sharing a piece of my story. And that is because I had an experience a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, I think, where I was just really face to face with the reality of diet culture, beauty standards. And it was quite shocking in a way where it's like I knew this was going on, but to have it experienced it personally was sobering, I guess. So, to cut to the chase, I was recently got engaged in March of 2025. And a few weeks ago, I was on the East Coast and I went wedding dress shopping with my mom and my sister and two friends who are on the East Coast. And I knew that the diet industry and beauty standards can be especially loud when it comes to special occasions and the wedding industry. But I don't know. I guess I kind of just like didn't think about it when I was going to be going through this myself. So, on the podcast today, I'm going to be sharing a story of something that happened the other day when I was wedding dress shopping. We're going to be talking about how diet culture shows up in the wedding industry, and I'll talk about a client story from a few years ago that really just is coming up as I'm going through all of this myself. And we'll talk about a little comparison of what wedding dress shopping looked like for me versus what I imagined it would have looked like before having done this work. And then I'll talk about what realistic healing looks like on a body image journey. And then we'll close up the episode with some pieces that I hope you take away. Okay, so I'm talking around the story quite a bit. Let me just tell it to you. So 2 weeks ago-ish, I was at a wedding dress shopping appointment, actually my first one ever. And towards the end of the appointment, the woman was zipping me in, or more like clipping me into one of the last dresses I was trying on. And she casually asks, "What are your weight goals?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" You know, sort of it seemed out of the blue. She said, "Do you plan to lose weight for your wedding?" And I was like, "Oh man, this lady's barking up the wrong tree." Like, but obviously I wasn't gonna like go off on her. It's probably just like a standard part of her job, and I understand that it's something that, she's just salespeople are used to asking. So I said no. And she said, "Okay, do you plan to change weight at all?" And I said, "I don't really know. I guess I plan to stay the same, or, I'm not like intentionally planning anything." And she said, "Okay," and moved on with clipping me into the last dress, and the appointment went on its way. Now, because I do what I do for work, I felt like this was like a good investigative journalism opportunity. And when we were finishing up the appointment, I asked her, I said, how many people answer yes to that question? And she said, without even hesitating, she said easily more than half. Half of the people she asked that question to at least answer, yes, I am trying to lose weight for my wedding. Which, again, like not surprising, but still saddened me because that's a lot. That's a lot of people. And I think it just really captures the pressure on women in our society on a day where it feels like everyone's expecting you to like look the best you've ever looked, and we'll get into that in a second. But to stay with this story for now, I had known that this was something that could happen at a wedding dress shopping appointment because I've had clients share with me that this happened. And thankfully, being where I am in this work, it didn't like catch me too off guard, but it still was a sobering moment of realizing like this really is going on. And it is a reality for so many people where without even missing a beat, they're like, yeah, of course I want to lose weight for my wedding. And before we get any further into this episode, I want to say up front, I do not judge anyone who would answer yes to that question. In fact, I can completely understand why you would answer yes to that question. It is so normal to feel the pull to shrink before a big day or to tone or to sculpt. And society and the media reinforce this pressure, which is now magnified by GLP-1s and, the social media trends. And even as an anti-diet dietitian, some of those thoughts have creeped in my head, not necessarily for me about weight loss, but some other manifestations of these pressures, like, oh, should I tone my arms? So I still feel that pressure on some level, even though I do this work for a living and I've been on my own body acceptance journey for almost 11 years. So, before we go any further, I just want to say this is not going to be a podcast episode where me, a dietitian with straight privilege, straight sized body privilege, in a relatively young body with several unearned privileges, this is not going to be an episode of me wagging my finger at you if you desire weight loss. If you are planning to lose weight in preparation for your wedding or any other big day, I do not judge you. Again, I acknowledge that I hold several unearned privileges that make it potentially easier for me to do this work because though I face personal body image distress, I don't bump up against the same systemic oppression because of several unearned body privileges. Again, including being straight-sized, relatively young, and in many ways meeting up with conventional beauty ideals. So, with all that being said, I do not judge or shame anyone who feels those pressures. I feel them too. I'm not immune to them, even though this is what I do for a living. So, with that, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how diet culture shows up in the wedding industry. Now, I don't really like have a whole lot to say because what it seems pretty simple to me. It just seems like, yeah, diet culture is always lurking, especially not to say it doesn't impact men or people of other gender identities, but historically, the pressures are especially loud for women. And the wedding day just amplifies all the pressures women already feel on a day-to-day basis. And I think it also kind of normalizes some disordered behaviors like losing a bunch of weight or restricting and dieting in preparation for the wedding. I feel like these are things that somehow maybe seem like more okay to do if you have a wedding or a big event coming up, which is not the case. Like it's not okay. It's not okay. Like you're not wrong for doing this, but it's not okay that people are made to feel this pressure that this is what they have to do. I think specifically with some of the things I've been seeing, especially because my algorithms are tuned into the fact that I'm getting married and they are serving me certain content. One thing I've seen is these like bridal arms workouts. Like I don't know where this comes from, but yeah, people wearing these like weighted wrist things and like doing certain workouts to tone their arms. And overall, just this messaging that like you should look the best you've ever looked on your wedding day. You should get facials for months leading up or Botox or whatever work done, and you should do all these workouts, and you should get 10,000 steps a day leading up to your wedding every day, and all these things that like you should be doing, which again, I think there's pressure in general for all the things that women should be doing to look the right way. And the wedding just amplifies the already existing pressures in society. And I think there's a bit of a double standard too. Like, I am always really careful to not overgeneralize with genders because I do work with men, and I absolutely hear the ways in which they face pressures to look a certain way, and they're not immune to the pressures of diet culture and the beauty industry. It just takes its di like a different form with men. But I do think with wedding culture, like I don't think the seamstress or tailor is asking men when they're getting a tux fitting, like, oh, are you planning to lose weight? Or like, what are your weight goals? Maybe they are. Maybe I'm wrong. To me, it seems like something unique to women and women's experiences. And yeah, I don't really hear about men like going through all these different beauty procedures for the months leading up to their wedding to look the best they've ever looked. I feel like they just kind of like get a haircut and like, I don't know, roll out of bed and do their thing. So those are the big ways I see diet culture showing up in the wedding industry, to say it back, the sort of normalization of disordered eating behaviors in preparation for the wedding, whether that's like crash dieting or restricting or cleanses or any of these things. And now some of these sort of bride-specific marketed regimens, like these bridal arms workouts, I'm certainly getting served that. And then this narrative that a woman should look the best she's ever looked on her wedding day, and she should do whatever she has to do in the days leading up to it or the months leading up to it. And that kind of coming with this double standard of like that messaging isn't really the same for men. So those are some of the ways that I've seen diet culture show up in the wedding industry so far. I still am sort of like just fully wrapping my head around uh this whole world. It's only been a few months, and I don't know, I try to intentionally not seek out wedding content because I just find it's too overwhelming and it makes me like get in my head unnecessarily. So yeah, that's only the content I've been served sort of passively. Now that we've established the ways in which diet culture shows up in the wedding industry, I want to talk about a client story from several years ago that came up for me when going through this experience. So I remember a few years ago when I was working with a client, as part of going through her history and her timeline, she shared that she did a big crash diet leading up to her wedding. And she shared that she was over-exercising and restricting. And when her wedding day came, she remembers standing up there feeling faint, distracted, and really struggling to be present because she was just so fixated on her body, her appearance, and quite frankly, she was starving. She was weak from weeks or months of under eating and over exercising and probably not meeting her body's energy needs in preparation for the wedding. And she shared feelings of regret of like she'll never be able to get that day back. And diet culture stole her brain space and her presence and joy from this really big life moment that was supposed to just be celebratory and lovely. And that story always really stuck with me because it just feels so poignant of how diet culture robs us of the important things in life, of connection, of presence, of joy, of celebratory moments where we're supposed to be celebrating with our loved ones, but instead we're thinking about how we look, what we're eating, and overanalyzing every single aspect of our bodies. And that just feels so sad. It feels so sad and feels so unfair. And it reminds me of Christy Harrison, a fellow anti-diet dietitian, in her first book, Anti-Diet. She calls diet culture the life thief. And that just feels so pertinent here. It just, yeah, stealing joy, stealing presence from these once in a lifetime moments like your wedding day. So now that I've shared a piece of my own story of what happened the other day when I was wedding dress shopping, and we've just talked about sort of the larger impact of diet culture stealing joy, stealing important life moments away from us, I thought it would be fun to reflect on then versus now. So I thought it would be fun to think about if I went wedding dress shopping, say 10 years ago, in this like hypothetical situation where I somehow was engaged 10 years ago, even though I wasn't even dating my current partner 10 years ago, but just for the sake of this thought experiment, how wedding dress shopping would have gone 10 years ago versus how it actually went 2 weeks ago. So, if I went wedding dress shopping 10 years ago, when I was in the throes of my own, actually, I wasn't really in the throes of it 10 years ago. I was coming out of it, let's say just 11 years ago. You get the point. If I was wedding dress shopping when I was in the throes of my own disordered eating and body image issues, it would have looked so different. First of all, I would have restricted and over-exercised and obsessed about my body size in the months leading up to the dress shopping appointment. Then, on the day of the appointment, I would have certainly made sure to like exercise before. I probably would have been really obsessed with whether or not I pooped before the appointment because that was a thing that was always really concerning to me. And I would have been really sensitive to hearing my measurements. So, one of the first things the woman helping at the bridal appointment did was she took a tape measure, measured like three different spots on my body, said them out loud, wrote them down, and then she kind of showed me a sizing chart and was like, these are the sizes of the dresses that, would make sense for you. And that would have sent me absolute spiraling. Like, I would have obsessed over those measurements and I would have absolutely been upset by the dress size number. No matter what it was, it probably wouldn't have been small enough or correct for that perfectionism, sort of like never enough high achieving part of my mind that diet culture really activated. So once I was in the dresses, I probably would have overanalyzed like every part of how it looked on my body. And I certainly would have overanalyzed the photos after the dress shopping appointment, zooming in, deciding what looked good, what didn't, and like really probably berating myself and trying to fix the parts that I didn't think looked good in the photos. Now, contrast that with how wedding dress shopping actually went. I continued life as normal in the months leading up to the appointment. I didn't change anything about my working out or eating regimen. I listened to my body's cues and it was kind of a non-event. The morning of the appointment, I did not get up early to exercise because I got in really late the night before from my flight to the East Coast, and I was certainly not sacrificing any precious sleep to work out. I ate a normal breakfast that morning. I don't know if I pooped or not. Probably didn't because my circadian rhythm was probably a little bit disrupted from the time change. Anyway, who cares? And when the woman took my measurements, I was like, oh, okay. Like the measurements that didn't really do anything to my brain. But what I will say was hearing the dress size was still slightly activating. Even knowing that your dress size is how it works for whatever reason with wedding dress shopping is bigger than your like regular size and things. But either way, that was still slightly activating, even knowing that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, here are some numbers when she wrote the numbers down of my different measurements. And that was that. And when I saw the photos of how all the dresses looked after, I was like, okay, like objectively, this one looks good, this doesn't. And it wasn't like, oh, my body is wrong. It was just like, oh, that dress isn't right for me if I saw one that I didn't like how it looked. And by the way, 10 or 11 years ago, when asked, do you plan to lose weight for your wedding? I sure as hell would have said yes. And of course, 2 weeks ago when she asked that, I was like, no, like I plan to stay the same. I don't have any weight goals for my wedding. So those are some of the differences between then and now, just to give you an example of what healing could look like on a body image journey. And to be clear, like it doesn't mean that I never have a negative thought about my body. It's just that the magnitude and the intensity of those thoughts have gone down. To get more specific about what healing actually looks like on a body image journey, I'm not like, oh my God, I love my body. Everything is perfect. Butterflies and rainbows, body positivity, yay, yay, yay. No, absolutely not. There are still parts of myself that I don't feel like I love. But the difference is, first of all, my body image distress used to be like an 8 or 9 out of 10. Now it's like a 3 or 2. I mean, mostly it's probably more like a 1, and when it's more heightened, it can lean more towards a 3. So anywhere between a 1 and 3. It's not that there's no distress, it's just that the distress is way lower. And instead of fixating on like, oh my God, how can I change myself to be valid? It looks like grieving, like, yeah, I still don't like this part of my midsection or my quote unquote love handles. That's always been a thing that's been a fixation for me. Yeah, that's a bummer. And what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? It's now there's this knowing that I don't have as much control over every little aspect of my body as I've been led to believe. Because when I was younger, I used to think like, okay, I can like specifically target this part of my body, and if I eat this food, then that will blast belly fat here, or if I do this exercise, that will specifically tone this exact part of my body. And is some of that true to maybe some extent? Is there a kernel of truth that certain exercises could tone certain parts of your body? Yeah, sure. But what I now understand is the extent to which we can target certain parts of our body and our appearance with food and exercise has been way blown out of proportion by diet culture. And we are not like just like lumps of clay that we can mold and shape in whichever way we like. That is unrealistic, and it's a lie that we've been sold by the beauty industry, by diet culture, because they want to sell us the things. They want to sell us the weighted arm bangles and the skinny detox tea and whatever it is to make us think we can look that way so that we buy in and we're customers that give them money. And I now just have so much more education and awareness around this is very intentional. I am being made to feel this way on purpose, and doesn't take away still feeling some grief and still feeling some dissatisfaction at times with different parts of my body. But it does sort of stop the spiral. So instead of being like, oh no, look at the way my stomach is protruding here. Let me start Googling ways to burn fat there and foods to eat to slim down over there. It's just like, oh, okay. I don't really love that part of my stomach. Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. All right. Yeah, let's sit in that. It doesn't, it's the thought is there, but it's not followed by action because I know that one, the amount to which we can impact how our body looks in any certain part is something that's been blown out of proportion and sort of like sensationalized and sold to us in a way that isn't fully accurate. And two, even if we can make those changes, maintaining those changes is very commonly not sustainable. Something like 95% of the time, you'll end up regaining all the weight back, if not more. And that's just not a cycle I want to go down. And I don't want to ever restrict because I know that leads to fixation and binging. So there's just so much more education, things I can't unknow that prevent me from ever acting on those thoughts. It doesn't mean the thoughts aren't there. It doesn't mean that I love every single part of myself. What realistic healing on a body image journey really looks like is the thoughts being there, allowing space for them, grieving them, sitting in the suck, and not acting on them. And knowing that you can have those thoughts and still be a fully valid, whole person. So, more than one thing can be true at once. Those thoughts are there, and it's not like I'm like trying to do anything about them. I think that's really the biggest difference is sort of this like radical acceptance of the thoughts, radical acceptance of my body looks the way it looks. And there's parts of it I don't love. That's okay. That's okay. You can still respect yourself. You can still be a confident and whole and valid person, even without loving every single aspect of your physical appearance. I hope that helps you see that body image healing doesn't mean that I love myself and my curves and my love handles and my wrinkles and my saggy skin and whatever. it doesn't have to be that because I think for some people, they're like, that is so unrealistic. I can never imagine authentically saying and feeling those things. And then they just feel like a fraud because you're like, no, I don't love myself. And I'm here to say that's okay. You can have a positive relationship with your body. You can respect your body. You can even heal your body image without loving how you look. That's okay. I hope that gives you relief in knowing like this body image healing might be more accessible than you thought because you don't have to go from disgust and hating and self-loathing to self-love and I love myself. I hope you can take away from this episode a few things. One, if you are in the wedding part of your life at all, I hope you can know that you're not alone and some validation that the diet industry gets extra loud anytime it has a chance. And one of those chances is when people get married because it is a time where you're like extra vulnerable to how you look and appearance. So if you have gone through that, or you are going through that, or you know a loved one going through that, please know you're not alone, or please share with your loved one that you're not alone. This is intentional. Diet culture is made to get louder in certain parts and seasons of life, and it's not fair. It's screwed up. It's them trying to capitalize on already vulnerable people, but it happens, and you're not alone if you're feeling those extra pressures. The next piece I hope you can take away is that life is too precious to let diet culture be a thief and steal you away from your really big moments. And I hope that can be motivation to resist some of the urges to restrict and overexercise and harm yourself in preparation for a big day like a wedding. I hope that you can have compassion for yourself, even if you are in a place where you feel the pressure to try and shrink your body or sculpt or mold your body in any certain way leading up to your wedding, because yeah, we do live in a weight stigmatizing society and the pressure to look a certain way is real. You are not making that up. Diet culture is real, fat phobia is real, and beauty standards are real, and the pressures can be heavy. So I hope you can have compassion for yourself if you are feeling those pressures. And I hope that hearing me reflect on then versus now for my own story can help you see what realistic healing on a body image journey actually looks like. And what I want to leave you with is this. It is hard either way. If you decide I'm going to try and diet and restrict and change myself leading up to my big day, that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because you're going to probably be hangry and be riding this roller coaster where you're thinking about food and you're fixated on your appearance, and it can lead to preoccupation. And it might even be hard in the sense that it's likely out of alignment with your authentic values. And it's also hard to swim upstream, resist the urges to try and change yourself leading up to your wedding or your big day. It's uncomfortable to sit in grief of grieving parts of your body that are out of your control, grieving the cultural pressures that you might be facing. It is hard either way. And since it's hard either way, I just think about why not invest that energy in healing, in actually moving the needle on healing and finding peace with your body image instead of putting a temporary band-aid, which is temporarily changing how you look, toning your arms, losing weight, doing whatever you're going to do, only to end up right back where you started, which is like, I still hate myself because that's what happens. You look back on pictures and think, what was I thinking? I looked fine then, but I still hated myself. And that's because body image healing happens in the mind. It's not even about the body. So I just think about you might as well start doing this deep work on healing your body image, looking at your values, understanding the cultural pressures and trying to challenge them and your own internalized biases that you've picked up from the culture we live in. I think about if it's going to be hard either way, I don't know, why don't we choose the hard that's in the direction of healing? Now, with that being said, you have body autonomy. If you decide, I do really want to tone my arms or sculpt the whatever leading up to my wedding, that's a fine and valid choice. And I don't judge you for that. You have body autonomy, you get to choose. But when given the choice, we can put our energy towards changing ourselves in order to try and feel valid, or we can put our energy towards trying to change the system in order to create a change where people don't feel like they have to look the best they've ever looked on their wedding day or to be valid. And by listening to this episode and thinking about body image work and intuitive eating and divesting from diet culture, you are already educating yourself and doing something in the direction of changing the system. Because the more people that are aware of the ways in which diet culture pressures us to do certain things, the more that we bring that into our awareness, the less power it has over us, the more that we can sort of do that work for ourselves, the more it can ripple out into the people around us. And that is how change happens. It starts with the individual. So I hope you got something from this episode. And if you know anyone in your life who is planning a wedding, or if this would help anyone, I encourage you to send it their way. And thanks for being here and listening to this more personal, reflection inspired episode. I will see you in our next episode.